think I might be through.
All right, so we kind of on that side.
I'm on. Okay, great. I really apologise for today and the fact that we've had technical issues getting in today. So I'd like to apologise for that. Ultimately, I'm here to talk about financial awareness and what you can do with your money as and when, and what you should think about when you think about money, because money is obviously a bit of a scary topic when you're used to having everything sort of paid and organised for you, and now it's a shift and change in your lifestyle to starting to think about these things, and then going to university, and if you through university it's then on to careers and what you do. So my name's Fiona and I work at Rathbones. Rathbones look after people's money when they have some money and they want to save and invest it and then live off some income. But let's take it back a stage. So firstly, cash. How do we get some money? So there's, once you're in this stage, there's Saturday jobs, and the university, there's university holidays and holiday jobs in general. And then later we get onto the permanent jobs when you leave education. So then this will give you some income. Now, obviously, a lot of people are like, right, great, have some money for the first time, and they go off and they want to spend it, which is great. But what we're trying to say here is don't blow it all at once. Really try and control what you spend and how you are spending. And a good way of doing this is sort of taking out cash from the actual bank and actually spending that for a week, say, because at the moment it's so easy when you can tap on your phones and your cards. You don't really have any idea of what you're spending, and that's when we find that people can get into some debt issues. So that's one way of trying to control what you spend and have an idea of what you spend and control your budgeting slightly. And then there's also the situation of when you have some money, it's considering trying to save some of that to buy a car or whatever ultimately you might be looking to do with your funds. So I have got some slides up, but unfortunately I'm not sure I'm able to move these on. Yes, I am actually, so apologies for that. So on the slide deck you can see there in front of me, it says, let's consider your financial aspirations. So I think this is an important one. It might be quite young for some of you to look at this, but I think you have to consider what's the next stage. So gap year funding, holidays, travel plans, they've all got to be paid for. And how are you going to pay for that? Well, that might be getting those jobs. What I think we want to consider here as well is debt. So there's good debt and there's bad debt. So good debt is taking out a loan which is affordable, or a student loan which is very controlled in terms of how it's paid back. They are relatively high interest rates, but at least it is a controlled way of paying the funds back. What I would say bad debt is is the situation with credit cards, where they can suddenly become very expensive. You can look at something called the AER, which is the actual interest rate that you will pay over the year. And sometimes these are incredibly high. They can be well over 10%. And when you think that the bank rate at the moment is 0.1%, that is a huge rate of interest that you're paying over time, and that will compound up. So just be very mindful of debt and consider that there are different means of taking on debt, and really try not to use the credit card as a means of racking up the debt, as it were. So, but let's go on and see if we move on to the next slide. Let's look at your financial goals. So I suppose what I'd like you to consider is if you look for the next 3 to 5 years, you'll all be in different stages of your education and potentially careers and jobs. But let's look at the next 3 to 5 years. What are your aspirations, and what are you trying to get out of the next 3 to 5 years? I think it sounds like there's now a fire alarm issue, which is not ideal. So I might try. I'm going to talk through it, actually. I'm just going to carry on. I'm sorry about this. So let's just consider what you wanted to do for the next 3 to 5 years, and some of that might come back to the previous slide, where we looked at the gap year, whether it be saving up for university, it might be buying a car, it might be the next stage of buying a property. And then we also need to consider, when we're talking about finance, we need to consider the long term. And I'm going to touch a bit later on particularly pensions, because that is a consideration that you need to take on for the longer term. But if we just go back and look at where we are in terms of, oh, no, there we go. Let's go back a slide. So when you have got some money, and you do consider what you're looking to do, what are the type of things you can do with money? So I'm going to look at 3 different things here. I'm going to look at, the first one is bank deposit, and what you do, and you've got a current account and you've got fixed term savings that you can put your money into. That's just straight in your bank. It's in no wrapper whatsoever. Then we can consider ISAs. Now, ISA is something that the government allows you to save into what we call a wrapper, and it's tax free. So you want to build those up if you can over time. And we have things called junior ISAs, where you can pay £9,000 a year into, and we have lifetime ISAs, which is something that we need to consider taking out. And it's a form of pension, because if you put in money, the government top it up. And so it's a very good rate of return you can have on those. And then there's pensions, and that's for people who've started to have a job, because the earlier you pay into a pension, the better. And also we need to consider the employers. And if the employers are putting money in and you put money in, they often increase their level. So it's really worthwhile when you get into a job to look at what that pension policy is, and not sort of be scared by it, and to really focus on what is the maximum I can get out of this pension. If I put in a certain amount, will my employer match it, rather than just leaving it at the basic minimum? So those are the 3 things I'm going to touch on. But the first thing I want to talk about is a little bit about finances in general, and looking at so those different options, either putting it in the bank or investing it. What's the difference, and why do we do either of those things? So looking at savings, what could we do with savings? Well, there's 3 things here I've written down. You can stick it all under the mattress. You might have heard of people talking about that and doing that in the olden days. You can put it in the bank, which is what most of you are doing with any cash that you have at the moment, or you can invest it. That's the 3rd thing. So I'm going to look at all of those and see why we think investing it is a superior choice. So what is the problem with sticking it under the mattress? Well, the answer is, it's safe. If you put money away in your drawer or on the mattress, it doesn't change in value. You put £100 in, and there you are, it's ready to take out. But you get no growth, and you're hit with something called inflation. Now, inflation is a really key area really to think about. And it doesn't matter over a 1-year period, but when you start and look in the longer term, inflation is key. So this slide's very interesting really, because if you look at what you've got there, you've got the price of a loaf of bread and the price of a beer all over various time periods, and you can see that if you just keep your money uninvested, inflation eats away at your return. And basically what will be a loaf of bread was 20, 30 years ago to what it costs now is very different. So the impact, if you do nothing and have no growth, and your money is effectively flatlined over a long term, is very negative. And what your real spending power is a lot less. So that you're forced to take on some risk with your funds. In terms of inflation, what's it running at right now? About 2%. But people might read on the press. You might see house price inflation has gone up by 9% this year. So some things you really do need. If you're putting it in the bank and you're getting 0.1%, what you can buy this year and what you can buy next year is going to be a different property. So how do we keep up with that? Inflation in general, this is another way of looking at it, is to look at your expenses. So this is just taking a round figure here. Your expenses are looking at £50,000 a year, and they increase in line with inflation. And we got there on this table. You can see inflation going up at 2, 5 or 10% across the top. And then you've got the different number of years. Now, today and the move is very, very little and unchanged. And even over 5 years, it's not that much different. But if you go down and look over 20 years or 50 years, that 50,000 becomes a completely different figure when you consider what inflation does. So your expenses will ramp up significantly. And just by putting money in a set deposit, returning nothing, or under your mattress is is going to mean that you have a lot less power to spend over time, and so that's basically the argument about inflation. Is it's a key area that you need to consider when you're looking at savings and what to do, because the life carries on and the costings of everything increases, and you need to keep yourself moving with that. Now, that might be a pay rise in line with inflation, but ultimately, if you have any savings, you need to keep them moving as well. So the other option is to put it in the bank. So this is where you are going to get some interest. So you're going to get some of that interest at the moment. In the moment, I say interest rates are 0.1%. That's very, very low. So let's look at what happens if you had £10,000 on deposit. You have, I've been generous here and given an interest rate of 1%, because over time that interest rate will go up and it won't always stay at 0.1%. And you can see there you get £100 for your £10,000 on deposit. Then you might get taxed when you start and earn some funds. I put in a 40% tax rate, but even if it's 20% tax rate, you're getting either 20 or £10 taken off. And then you've got inflation that keeps running at that time, and that's 2%, like I mentioned earlier. So you've got to take off £200 for the cost of what you bought today versus the cost of the same thing you're buying in a year's time will have gone up by 2% on average. So that means that you've actually gone backwards with your money, even in real terms and spending power terms. So that again comes back to that inflation, and that is with getting some interest. If you then put it under the mattress, you're obviously not getting that £100 at all, so it's going down even further. So putting money in the bank is fine in the short term if you're saving to buy a car or something that's imminent and something that you're going to do, or a holiday or a travel plans. That's fine to do that, but over the long term we need to consider other options. So most people's aim is to keep up with inflation for the reasons I've said. So then how do we do that? So the benefits of investing and how that keeps up. Let's have a look. Now, one of the main things we think about when you invest money, I'm talking funds in general, is the power of compounding. Now, this means that if you have funds, so here we have an example. If you £10,000 at 5%, it suddenly at the end of year one becomes 10,500. Then the next year you have 10,500 at 5%, it becomes 11,025. And then the following year again, 11,025 at 5% becomes 11,576. So you can see that the fact that you're increasing at 5% on a greater amount each year because you're reinvesting those funds is very, very important. And this £10,000 over a 50-year time period, which might be from a pension or some form of months, can become 114,000, and that is just taking a 5% return year on year and reinvesting it back into yourself. So that compounding effect is really important to consider when you're taking any sort of investing. And this is the same concept just shown to you in a graphical format. So you've got the principal at the bottom, you've got the interest coming through, and then if you don't take out that interest each year and you let it grow, you can see that it really does start to increase in terms of value over the years for you over time. So that's really what I wanted to say about looking to invest. Now, what we can do with that, at the moment you guys might be thinking, well, that's fine, but I don't have the funds at the moment to do that. But I think these things are important to consider, particularly for those when you're getting into the workplace environment, because really the inflation that you can see there means that you can't put your funds, you've got to really put your funds to work, because you won't be able to access these funds for 30 to 40 years. And therefore you really do need to consider the investment of those funds over time, and you really do need to consider what you can get from your employer and maximizing that, because a lot of employers put in a basic amount, but if you add another 3% of your pay, they will add a further 3%. So that's really key that you get that extra uplift for this power of compounding effect that we've got here detailed. So ultimately, we do run a Rathbones, we run a course and it's free and anyone can sign up on it from our website, and hopefully in the chat function. I can't see that, I'm afraid, at the moment, but you'll be able to see that there is a link to that if you go on the Rathbones website, anyone can sign up from anywhere, and it's a course that's run 3 times a year on Zoom. It's run in the holidays, so we run one in April, August, and December. And the idea behind that is to go into budgeting in a bit more detail. We go into student loans and debt in more detail, and we go into investments in a bit more detail as well. So those 3 key areas, and it gives you a really good idea about finance and what we can do. And it's, as I say, it's totally free, and it's on Zoom, and it varies in terms of the course time, but it's normally about a sort of half a day to a day program that we run with different people talking and trying to make it very interactive from your point of view as well, so you get a little bit more of an understanding. So anyone is welcome to sign up to that. That's for 16 to 24-year-olds, so it's aimed at that age range only, and giving you some extra tips and thoughts on that. Ultimately, I suppose what I'm wanting to sort of impart today is that don't be scared by money. People sometimes think about money and think, oh, I don't know, I don't understand finances, I'll just leave everything and just put it in the bank. There is a lot to learn about what you can do with your money. And one of the best things I always think is you can now go online and get some of these virtual share portfolios. So you can pick some companies that you might have thought of, like Amazon, for example, or Apple. Most people know those companies and are probably using those. I'm using my iPhone at the moment as my other computer wouldn't log in. But ultimately, these companies all have shares, and you can go on and do a virtual portfolio where you don't have to put money in online, and you can really see those shares moving up and down in value. But over the long term, some of these are done incredibly well, and the benefits that you can have over leaving your money in cash. There's obviously a risk associated because not everything goes up in a straight line and things move around and come back down. But if you have money that you can consider investing and have a reasonable time horizon on that, it's a really good way. And there's lots of online sites that you can put in money, whether it be a Hargreaves Lansdown or a site if you wanted to trade and put some money to work for you. They're relatively cheap to trade. It's £10 a trade, and you can have a go at seeing what the benefit of some funds can do and the share portfolio can do, and then it gives you a bit more of an understanding. But the virtual way of doing it, where you don't actually have to put money to work, is a really good way of saying, oh, I could have traded that and come out and I'd have had some funds there. So it's a really good way of seeing the movements over time of shares and what you would have done with your money if you'd started with £100 and what you end up with virtually. So I would really encourage any of you to have a look at that. If you have got some funds, all the mainstream banks will look at ISAs for you. ISAs can be in cash, like we're saying, whether you get a deposit rate, or they can be in shares. And those 2 effects of need to make sure you're getting a reasonable return on that investment because of inflation. So you need at least more than 2% really, or considering investing it in a fund, whether it's just a medium risk or higher risk, depending on your attitude to risk. ISAs, as I say, you can take those out with all the mainstream banks. And then you can also consider something called a lifetime ISA, and that has restrictions on it, but it means that if you put in £4,000, the government will top it up by £1,000, and you will instantly have 5,000, and then you can invest it and get the benefits of growth over time. There are restrictions on that lifetime ISA, though, in terms of what you can have your money out for. It's normally to buy a property or in retirement, so just be a little bit more careful with that, because ISAs, you can have your money in and out at any point. So I think that those are the main things I really wanted to cover today. I think the other thing that I really wanted to touch on is budgeting and how you go about working out what you want to do with your money, because a lot of people, as I say, get slightly scared by it and aren't focused on what they need what their targets are. So it goes back to that slide at the very beginning. I said, well, what are your goals and what are you looking to achieve with your finances over time? And ultimately, the aim here is to say you need to have a sit down, have a think, right, what money do I need for when, and how am I going to get that? So really have a think about that, and if it needs that you need to take out some loans and to fund that, that's fine. But really consider what that interest rate is, because the same effect of this power of compounding for investment also works for debt as well. So you've got to be careful that as your debt increases by a certain amount per year, then that say you have 5% interest on your debt. If you start with £100, you get to 105, and then the 105% is the 105 starts, and that's 5% on 105, not on the original 100. So you can see the effect of that then becoming increasingly over time. So you do need to consider the debt and very much look for that AER rate, which is the actual interest rate that you're going to pay over the year, and that compounding effect. But loans are often a much better way of doing it than credit cards, because credit cards, if you start racking up on that, the interest is normally over 10% on those. So that is a very major consideration when you get that compounding effect, like on this chart here, where each year it increases if you're not going to pay it off at the end of the year. So budgeting is key. So either use spreadsheets or whatever it is you might do, or do the trick of actually just taking out cash and seeing what you spend on that week, on a typical week, and really focusing, because actually to spend cash and to give the hard-earned cash over versus just a tap of your phone is a very different feel, and you'll really start to work out where you're going with that. We've all made mistakes with finance over time, and you live and learn from your mistakes, but ultimately it's about not being scared of it and just looking into these things. And if you have got an interest and want to learn more, then I would really recommend that you consider our financial awareness course, because it's targeted for people like yourselves, and it'll give you a better understanding of and also we'll talk about mortgages and what to think about in that space as well. But I'm not sure mortgages are quite the right thing for me to talk about today, because I think we've got a slightly younger audience. But yeah, that's all I've really got to talk about today. If you've got any questions or anything, please do use the chat function. I will come back to you. I can't unfortunately see that now, so I can't answer any of those questions now, but I will certainly come back to you, and we will arrange to send out that link on the financial awareness, which, as I say, is free, and you just sign up, and it's a Zoom course. So very worthwhile you having a look at that. And if you've got any questions, anything at all, doesn't matter what it is, do just put something in the chat, and I'll get back to you after the event. Anyway, enjoy the rest of your day, and I'm very sorry about the tech situation in my office here. I think our office has stronger controls on what devices we can get on, what external sites we can get onto. But anyway, all the best, and enjoy the rest of your day.